G, I, X, M.
It's good for the bottom, the same thing, but on top, this is actually better because you don't know what you're using. You know, you see at the top here, at the bottom is small. You can see what's no, I'm not sure that
I haven't seen it like what it is.
So what did you do about that?
I used to watch that last, but I came out after like I finished college the first time.
I know, that's how you
You see now the error goes to 0. Delete that. So now we have two clean sets of data. This is the current and this is the constant. All right? From this data, we're going to create the inflation data. Price data. Price indices that we use. So I'm going to copy all of this. Paste it. And we're going to call this price inflation. And these are implicit. Does anybody know the difference between implicit and explicit? I guess not. Implicit means that they got to be consistent with what the data that we have already. So here's how we get it. Highlight that equals 100 times we take this over here for the current and we divide it by the same line here. Everybody see that? Now we can Control Shift Control Shift. And now we drag this down. And we'll reduce this to 1 decimal. Now, let me explain what these numbers are.
Oh, that makes sense. I'll do this. That makes a lot of sense.
We see that in the year 2005, this is always 100. And every other year, it's something else. Now, what it means is this. Let's go with consumption. Household consumption data. It means that if you took a basket of household consumption goods, milk, eggs, stuff like that, rent, and paid $100 for it in 2005, it would have cost you $175 in 2010. This is Paraguay, they must have had a big inflation.
Inflation, right?
That same basket of goods, way back in 1970, would have only cost you $28.40.
Funny how actually there are some things that cost $111.
So this represents the price change as we go up. You notice they had a tremendous inflation between 78
Yes, this is supposed to be.
and 80. But they weren't the only country in the world to have a big inflation between 78 and 80. Except that theirs was probably bigger than most. That was a high inflation time in the world. Even in the United States, the inflation was running about 18% per annum. And then it got very high in 83. And then after that, they had deflation. What happened in 78?
78.
Very high inflation in that period of the 70s. Why? Because of the oil embargo. OPEC oil embargo caused that. But then you see, inflation died down, and then started picking up again. Now, what we like to do is compute the inflation. You're looking at the price deflator. The inflation is the change in the price deflator. It's the growth rate of the price deflator. So, for example, to compute the inflation from one year to the next, let's suppose we want to compute the inflation between 1999 and 2000 of consumption, which is over here. So the way we would do it is we take 100 and we times it by the number in 2000, 107.7, minus the number in 1999. 107.2, and then we divide it by 107.2. And that gives us the inflation between those 2 years. That's the computation we make. So let's do it now for all of consumption. See what kind of stability they had in the country. What people had to live with, right? If you've ever been in a country with hyperinflation, you'll know what I mean. Prices go crazy from one hour to the next. So we'll use consumption with it. First we'll look at the inflation, that household. And then we'll get inflation. We'll start with here. Equals 100 times open that number minus this number loaded divided by the first one. Control shift. But you can see between 1970 and 71, the inflation was 6.6%.
This number was the previous number and all that was the previous number.
Well, this gives you an idea what went on in this thing. Here we had 6.6%. Then inflation went up to 9.7%. We were at 70, to 16.9, 23.0. And then they did something. They got it back down to 8.2%. They may have put on price control, but they did something. And then it went down negative. All right. Then at plus 1.8. Then back up to 15%, and then up to 61.8%. So you can imagine the citizens living in this country with this price fluctuating here. very unstable. Then back down to 4.6%, 10.5, 2. Then back up to 21%.
How can inflation get negative?
The prices go down. Prices go down instead of going up.
Huh.
Here they went down 2 years in a row, and then they went up by 12.1, then back down,
Less than 5 minutes.
then up, then down, then up, still up, then then it's, look, suddenly we get a kind of stability until we get to this year over here. About 9.
That's what it was, 2 years, 4 years already.
Then stable, and then big dip in the prices. And then the prices are going down, and then they start coming back up again.
Yeah, but that's
A little bit.
consumption.
This is, yeah, 4.2% inflation.
Consumption doesn't tell you prices.
But 18.4%, a lot. 16.4. And then they go down again. Things dip down. And then very low inflation. So you ask yourself, how do they go down, right? Usually they go down because there's some interference with the price mechanism, either by the central bank or by the IMF or something like that. But what they do is they make adjustments to try to keep the inflation under control. This is a country that's been suffering. When you have that kind of price stability, that's not very good. People don't know how to plan. Businesses don't know how to plan. This is one way, yeah.
Could that be engineered by foreign exchange disparity between the local currency and?
Well, it's a little worse than local currency. The dollar stabilizes.
Oh, okay.
But if you do it in local currency, it always looks worse. So this is what we see is this rocky behavior. Even if you do this with the U.S., you find that we had very high inflation in the 70s, and then after that, it stabilized in the 80s. The Reagan administration stabilized inflation. And then it was very well behaved in the 90s under the Clinton administration. And then it sort of, inflation almost disappeared after the turn of the century. We had very low inflation, very moderate inflation. Inflation not all that bad. Deflation is in some ways worse than inflation. When I was studying economics in the late 1950s, they used to say, you got to have a little inflation in the economy, about 3.5%. They thought that was good. Gives people incentive to invest. But if you have deflation, people don't want to invest. You'll get a negative return on their money. That's what happened with the Great Depression, we had deflation. So this is one way you look at the country's economic history. Look at how that country behaves.
Bless you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions about how to get that paper?
I got it.
Now the next thing we want to look at is how the expenditure of the country was distributed in terms of GDP. We'll construct the table on the shares of GDP. And that will use the constant data. If you're going to, supposed to get the job to analyze the country.
Let's do the power off. Oh, it's a
just came in, turned in your homework and signed the sign-in sheet. I have to report you to the government tomorrow.
That's it.
FBI, CIA, it's out there, monitoring people. Something weird terrorist activity.
Kind of annoying.
It is kind of, well, I am.
It's necessary. September 11 change.
That sounds perfect. But I'm trying to record this, the thing, the mad money.
We're gonna change his title to Shared GDP. Shared GDP.
Well, apparently, according to Mike, it lasts a lot.
I don't know what is happening. It said that your credentials aren't good enough.
And they found out about my filter.
What?
Were you the constant?
Yeah, we use
I was willing to give you a CNBC tag too.
I would have totally gone for that CNBC tag. It's pretty awesome, dude. If I ever watched that channel, ever. Well, yeah, get talking speaking mode. Works for Con Ed. It's pretty cool. What are you talking about?
Now, to do this, we work from the constant table. First, we highlight these places over here.
I'm recording it.
Put it
I'm going
equal.
to post it on Facebook.
Then we put 100
It's pretty awesome.
times. Now we go over here to the constant table. We highlight all of these. And we hit the divide sign. And then we click on GDP. Then we hit Control, Shift,
100 times divided by 2.
Why should always be 100?
yeah, y should always be 100. Y divided by y.
Way too
Now
inefficient.
we'll change these. Now, this is always very interesting to look at. You get an idea of what the priorities were in the country. In 1970, households consumed about 68.3% of GDP. That's wrong. The government about 12%. That's good. Investment was about 17%. That's good. Exports were 24.4%. That's good. And imports were even less. You might also include over here exports minus imports.
Serious? I'm not surprised. Did you do it? Fired my ass over this.
Well, 1970 was a good year in Paraguay.
I know it had nothing to do with the time of
When we got to 1971, household consumption went up, Government consumption went down, that's good. Investment went up, that's good. Exports went down a little bit. Imports went up a little, but they were even. That's good. That's a very good thing. This country was probably importing capital goods to finance this increase in investment. Increase in investment finance imports of capital goods. Push the growth.
Yeah, dude, I didn't have internet for a while.
So, if we look down to C column, we notice that it's pretty well behaved until we get to 1979. Suddenly, there's a big drop. In 3 years. And there's a big drop in government. But there's a big increase in private investment. So something was happening here. The country got extra investment programs, and they start promoting their exports. But then they dropped down. But they're also increasing their exports. And then they get pretty well until we get to about 1993 or before. We suddenly see a big jump in household consumption from about 70% to 83.3%. That's a big jump. And we see government coming up. And we see the private sector pretty much the same. Exports, that's a but exports are really increasing.
Why is your RY not on this side?
And imports also increase.
Oh, you just did your
imports going up to about 90% of GDP.
Oh, this is why.
So they got on a buying binge, and they want to pay for it because they're exporting.
This is my name.
But the exports couldn't keep up with the imports. And you see that in this difference. When this difference becomes this large, the country owes the rest of the world money. That's the deficit. Now there's a mirror image to this, which is what we call the internal gap, the savings minus investment. Now that's equal to y minus c minus g minus I.
Per capita GDP, which is so it should be more than X number per person, right? That's how many people in the country. So that's okay.
And you see these numbers are identical.
X minus
And that's because it's an algebraic identity.
So you want me to have Ireland chart and put in Ireland chart by debt.
We start off with the national account identity. We get savings. National savings are equal to y minus c minus g. All right? So if you bring c and g over, you get y minus c minus g is equal to I plus x minus n. What we can call a savings. The savings is equal to investment plus x minus n. Right? Now if you bring the investment over, you get s minus I